He wasn't meant to notice it. Just a small hand in the crowd. Just another child playing beneath the late afternoon sun. But something in the way she moved froze the air around him before anyone else could feel it. The park stretched wide and golden under a soft Virginia sky, the scent of cut grass and distant barbecue drifting through the breeze, children laughing near the swing sets, a baseball thudding rhythmically into worn leather gloves. And in the middle of it all walked Staff Sergeant Ethan Cole, posture straight even out of uniform, one hand loosely holding the leash of sable-coated German shepherd named Rex, a dog whose instincts had once kept men alive in places most people only saw on the news, a dog trained to ignore distraction, to filter noise, to move only on command. But then it happened, so small it could have been missed if not for the way Rex's entire body locked in a single breath. A girl, no older than 10, stood near the edge of the walking path, her dress pale blue, her hair pulled back unevenly as if done in a hurry, and she raised her hand, not waving, not calling, just forming a shape with her fingers, subtle, deliberate, almost trembling. Rex stopped. Not slowed, stopped. His ears lifted high, his tail went still, and his eyes, those sharp amber eyes that had scanned deserts and alleyways and shadows thicker than night, fixed on her like he had just heard a voice no one else could hear. Ethan gave a quiet command, calm and practiced, heel, expecting the familiar shift, the obedient step, the smooth return to order. But Rex didn't move. The leash tightened slightly as the dog leaned forward. Not pulling, not aggressive, just drawn. Something unseen stretched between them. Invisible but undeniable. A jogger passed by without noticing. A couple laughed nearby. A stroller rolled over gravel with a soft crunch. And yet inside that ordinary moment something had already broken its pattern. The girl didn't run, didn't smile, didn't speak. She just held the sign a second longer, her fingers shaking now, her eyes wide, not with curiosity, but with something deeper, something that didn't belong in a child's face on a warm, safe afternoon. Rex took one slow step forward. Ethan's grip tightened, confusion flickering across his face, because this wasn't how Rex behaved, not here, not ever. The dog lowered his head slightly, not in submission, but in focus, the kind of focus that came before decisions that couldn't be undone. A faint sound escaped him, not quite a growl, not quite a whine. Something older, something remembered. Ethan followed his gaze and saw the girl more clearly now, the way her shoulders were too tense, the way she kept glancing past him instead of at him, like she was measuring distance, like she was waiting for something worse than being seen. The sunlight shifted through the trees, casting long shadows across the pavement, and for a brief second the world seemed to hold its breath with Rex. The leash pulled again, firmer this time, and Ethan whispered under his breath, "Easy, buddy." But even as he said it, he felt it, the quiet, creeping realization that this wasn't disobedience. This was recognition. Rex wasn't reacting to the girl. He was reacting to what she carried without words. The sign in her hand faltered, then steadied again, like it mattered more than anything else she could do. And in that fragile, suspended moment, with laughter still echoing in the distance, and the wind brushing softly through the leaves, the line between ordinary and something far more serious began to blur, and Ethan felt it before he understood it. That whatever had just passed between that child and his dog was not random, not coincidence, not imagination. It was a signal, and Rex had answered it. Before we begin, tell me, we're witching from Drop Your Country in the comments. I'd love to see how far this story travels. Rex does not blink as the girl lowers her hand halfway, her fingers curling as if unsure whether to continue or disappear into the safety of stillness. And Ethan feels the leash tremble in his grip, not from force, but from restraint, like a held breath that refuses to release. "Rex," he says again, firmer this time, the tone that once cut through chaos and confusion, the tone that meant structure, control, certainty, but the dog does not return a heel, does not shift his weight back into discipline. Instead, he takes another step forward, slow, deliberate, each paw placed with the careful precision of memory rather than command. People begin to notice now, not because anything loud has happened, but because silence has changed shape, The kind of silence that draws attention without asking for it. A man sitting on a bench pauses mid-sentence. A woman walking her golden retriever slows her pace. The faint rhythm of the park softens, as if something invisible has pressed down on it. Ethan exhales through his nose, steadying himself, telling himself there's an explanation. There's always an explanation, because Rex is not unpredictable. Rex is not impulsive. Rex does not break protocol unless something is wrong. The girl shifts her weight, one small step backward, and for a moment it looks like she might run, but she does not. Instead, she glances again over Ethan's shoulder. Not long. Just enough to confirm something is still there. Something she cannot ignore. Rex notices that glance. His ears pivot, catching a direction, a detail, a thread, and then he looks back at her with an intensity that feels almost human. Ethan follows the movement instinctively, turning his head slightly, scanning the path behind him, seeing only ordinary pieces of an ordinary day, a couple walking side by side, a teenager scrolling on his phone, an older man feeding crumbs to pigeons. Nothing that explains the quiet urgency building beneath his skin. Talk to me, Ethan says. Softly, not to Rex this time, but to the girl, his voice careful, measured, the way you speak when you know something fragile is about to either open or close. She hesitates, her lips parting as if words are forming but cannot find their way out, and instead of answering, she raises her hand again, repeating the same subtle motion, slower now, more deliberate, her fingers shaping something practiced, something she has done more than once. Rex reacts instantly, a low sound rumbling in his chest. Not aggressive, not threatening, but deeply alert, the kind of sound that once signaled recognition in places where hesitation cost lives. Ethan feels it then, not as a thought, but as a memory brushing the edge of his awareness. Something about coded gestures, something about silent communication, something Rex had been trained for long before he ever walked through this park on a quiet afternoon. Where did you learn that? Ethan asks, his voice quieter now, almost careful not to disturb the moment. But the girl shakes her head slightly, eyes still wide, still searching his face for something she is not sure he understands. Rex moves closer, the leash sliding through Ethan's hand another inch, and then another, until the distance between dog and girl is no longer safe in the way rules define safety, but something else entirely, something built on instinct instead of instruction. The girl's breathing quickens, shallow but controlled, and she whispers something so soft it barely reaches the space between them. He knows, and the words land heavier than they should, because Rex does know something Ethan does not yet see. The breeze shifts again, carrying a faint scent that Rex catches immediately, his nose lifting, nostrils flaring once, twice, processing, confirming, and then his entire posture changes, not relaxed, not tense, but focused in a way that narrows the world down to a single point. Ethan feels the shift travel through the leash like a signal, and for the first time since leaving the service, a familiar unease settles into his chest, the kind that comes before understanding, before action, before everything changes. The park is still there, the laughter, the sunlight, the ordinary rhythm of a safe place. But beneath it something else has begun to surface, something quiet, something hidden, something that Rex has already found, even if no one else has yet seen it. Rex closes the final inch of distance without waiting for permission, his movement so quiet it barely disturbs the gravel beneath his paws, and when he reaches the girl he does not jump or bark or circle, he simply lowers his head and presses his nose gently against her small, trembling hand, as if confirming something that cannot be spoken, and the girl inhales sharply, not in fear, but in recognition, her shoulders dropping a fraction, her fingers relaxing under the weight of that touch. Ethan feels the leash slacken completely now, the line between command and choice dissolving in his hand, and he does not pull it back, not this time, because something about the way Rex stands there tells him this is not a breach of training. It is the training revealing something deeper. The girl's lips move again, barely forming sound. You remember, and Rex exhales slowly, a soft breath that stirs the loose strands of her hair, his tail still, his body grounded, steady like an anchor. dropped into uncertain water. Ethan steps closer, careful, measured, his boots pressing into the dirt path as he lowers himself slightly to meet her eye level. "Hey, it is okay," he says, his voice calm, but carrying that quiet authority that has steadied people before. "You are safe here." But even as he says it, he feels the gap between words and truth, because safety is something you recognize, not something you were told. And this girl is still looking past him, still checking something over. His shoulder, still measuring distance that does not belong to the moment. Rex lifts his head suddenly, not breaking contact completely, but shifting his focus, his ears angling sharply to the left, his gaze locking onto something beyond Ethan, beyond the circle of quiet curiosity forming around them. A man near the edge of the path adjusts his jacket, a small movement, almost nothing, but Rex sees it, tracks it, and the low sound returns to his chest, deeper now, steadier. Not a warning yet, but close enough to feel like one. Ethan follows the line of that gaze again, slower this time, more deliberate, scanning faces instead of shapes, looking for what Rex already knows how to find. The man looks ordinary at first glance, mid-40s maybe, neutral expression, standing just far enough away to seem uninvolved, but there is something off in the way he holds himself. Not relaxed, not curious, just waiting. The girl shifts closer to Rex without realizing it, her small step bringing her shoulder almost against his side, and Rex responds instantly, adjusting his stance to shield without crowding, his body forming a quiet barrier that says more than any command could. "Do you know him?" Ethan asks softly, keeping his tone even, not pointing, not drawing attention, but the girl does not answer right away, her eyes flicking once more toward the man before dropping back to Rex. And then she nods, just barely, the kind of movement you could miss if you were not looking for it. The air changes again, subtle but undeniable. The easy rhythm of the park slipping further away as tension gathers like a storm that has not yet decided to break. Rex steps forward half a pace, placing himself fully between the girl and the direction of that man. And for the first time since this began, Ethan hears it clearly, a low, controlled growl that carries memory inside it. Not fear, not anger, but recognition sharpened by purpose. The man shifts his weight, glances away, then back again, and that small hesitation is enough for Ethan to feel the line snap into place. The moment when uncertainty becomes something else entirely. He straightens slowly, his hand tightening just enough on the leash to feel connected again without pulling Rex back. And he speaks quietly, more to himself than anyone else. "All right, I see it now," because he does not fully understand yet, not the whole picture, not the depth of what is unfolding, but he understands enough to know this is no longer a coincidence, no longer a simple misunderstanding in a quiet park. And beside him Rex stands unmoving, eyes fixed, body steady, as if he has been here before, as if he has been waiting for this exact moment to come back and ask him to choose what happens next. The man begins to move, not quickly, not enough to draw attention from anyone who is not already watching, but just enough to create distance. And that is when Rex reacts in a way Ethan has not seen since the last days before retirement. His body shifting forward with quiet urgency, not lunging, not breaking into chaos, but guiding, insisting, pulling the moment into motion. "Stay close to me," Ethan says softly to the girl, his voice steady but lower now, and she nods without hesitation, her small hand hovering near Rex's back, as if she already understands where safety lies. The gravel crunches under their feet as Ethan steps forward, allowing the leash to extend, not giving Rex full freedom, but no longer holding him back, because the dog is not chasing, he is tracking. And there's a difference that only someone who has walked through that kind of silence can recognize. The man glances once over his shoulder, his expression unchanged, but his pace adjusting, just slightly faster, just slightly less casual, and that is enough to confirm what instinct already whispered. Rex's nose lifts again, catching something faint, something carried on the shifting breeze, and his steps become more precise, more direct, as if a line invisible to everyone else has been drawn between where they stand and where they need to be. People begin to part without knowing why. stepping aside as if guided by something they cannot see, conversations trailing off mid-sentence. A few curious eyes following the quiet procession as it moves across the open stretch of grass toward the shaded path lined with old oak trees. Ethan's heartbeat settles into a rhythm he remembers too well. Not fear, not panic, but focus sharpened by purpose, the kind that narrows the world down to movement and meaning. "Rex, easy," he murmurs, not to slow him down, but to keep the edge from tipping, and Rex responds with the slightest flick of his ear, acknowledging without breaking stride. The girl stays close, her steps small but determined, her gaze no longer drifting as much, now anchored to Rex, as if he is translating something she cannot put into words. Ahead, the man reaches the edge of the tree line, where the light dims and shadows stretch longer across the ground, and for a moment he pauses, just long enough to look around again, measuring, deciding. And then he continues, but the pause has already said more than movement ever could. Rex stops abruptly, his paws digging lightly into the earth, his posture lowering, not aggressive but ready, his eyes locked, his breath controlled. And a low sound returns, deeper now, resonating in a way that makes even the nearby birds go quiet. Ethan steps up beside him, placing himself between Rex and the path forward without blocking his view, a silent agreement forming between man and dog, one that has nothing to do with commands and everything to do with trust. "Sir," Ethan calls out, his voice carrying just enough to reach without escalating. "Can I talk to you for a second?" The man hesitates, just a fraction, then turns slowly, his expression composed, neutral, practiced, but his eyes flick once toward the girl, and that single glance tightens something inside Ethan's chest. The girl grips a handful of Rex's fur, not pulling, just holding, grounding herself in something steady. And Rex leans slightly into her touch without looking away from the man, his entire focus fixed, unwavering. The distance between them closes by a few careful steps, not rushed, not forced, and the air between the two men feels different now, heavier, as if it carries questions that do not yet have words. Ethan stops a few feet away, close enough to see details, the faint tension in the man's jaw, the way his hands remain still at his sides. Too still, and he keeps his tone calm, measured. "Everything okay?" The question hangs there, simple on the surface, but beneath it something else moves, something both men understand without needing to name it. Rex shifts again, one paw forward, then still, waiting, listening, and in that suspended moment, with sunlight filtering weakly through the trees and the quiet hum of the park fading into the background, it becomes clear that whatever is about to happen next will not come from force or noise, but from recognition, from the subtle truth that has already begun to unfold. And the man, standing there under the shadow of the oaks, knows it too. The man does not answer right away, and that silence stretches just long enough to feel intentional, like something carefully chosen rather than accidental, his eyes settling on Ethan for a brief second before drifting again toward the girl, and that is when Rex shifts his weight forward, not stepping closer, not escalating, but grounding himself in a way that signals certainty rather than curiosity. Ethan notices it immediately, that subtle change, the same one he had seen before, moments when everything hinged on a decision made in silence. And his voice lowers just a fraction, calm but firm. "She seems a little uneasy, sir," he says, not accusing, not pushing, just placing the truth gently into the space between them. The man offers a small, controlled smile, the kind that does not quite reach the eyes. "Kids get nervous," he replies evenly, his tone smooth, practiced, but there is something behind it that does not settle, something that does not belong to an ordinary afternoon. The girl tightens her grip on Rex's fur again, her fingers trembling now, and she takes half a step closer to Ethan without looking up, her voice barely audible as she whispers, "He said not to talk," and the words fall soft but heavy, like a door opening into something darker than it should be. Rex reacts instantly, his head turning sharply toward the man, the low sound in his chest deepening into something more defined, not loud, not aggressive, but unmistakably alert. and Ethan feels it in his bones. That shift from uncertainty to clarity. The moment when instinct aligns with evidence. The man's posture changes just slightly, a tightening at the shoulders, a stillness in his hands that feels less like calm and more like control, and he takes a small step backward, casual on the surface, but Rex mirrors it immediately, stepping forward just enough to maintain the distance, not allowing it to widen, not allowing the moment to slip away. Ethan does not raise his voice, does not create a scene, but his presence becomes firmer, more grounded, as he adjusts his stance, placing himself more clearly between the girl and the man. "What is your name?" he asks the girl softly, his attention shifting just enough to give her space to answer, and she hesitates, her eyes flicking once more toward the man before settling on Rex. And then she whispers, "Lily," the name barely leaving her lips. Ethan nods slowly, absorbing it, anchoring it. "Okay, Lily," he says gently. "You are doing just fine." And Rex leans slightly into her again, reinforcing that quiet assurance without breaking focus. The man exhales a controlled breath and glances around as if noticing the small number of people who have begun to slow nearby, not close enough to interfere, but close enough to witness, and something in that awareness shifts his expression, just for a moment, a flicker of calculation that disappears almost as quickly as it came. Rex catches it anyway, his ears twitching, his body remaining still but ready, and Ethan sees it now as clearly as he has ever seen anything, not as a dramatic revelation, not as a sudden shock, but as a quiet, undeniable truth rising to the surface. "Sir," Ethan says again, this time with a little more weight behind the word. "I think it would be best if we stayed right here for a minute." Not a command, not an order, but something that carries enough presence to hold the moment in place. The man pauses, his gaze shifting between Ethan, Rex, and the girl, and for the first time there's a crack in the composure, something uncertain, something unsettled, and he nods slowly, too slowly, as if buying time rather than agreeing. Lily's breathing steadies just a little, her hand still resting against Rex, and she whispers again, almost to herself, "He found me." And Rex's tail gives the faintest movement, not a wag, not excitement, but recognition, the kind that settles deep and does not fade. The wind moves through the trees above them, carrying the distant sounds of the park back into the edges of the moment, but they feel far away now, muted, like the world has stepped back to let something else take its place. And Ethan stands there, steady, grounded, knowing without needing to say it that whatever is unfolding here is not coincidence, not misunderstanding, but something that Rex had already understood the second that small hand lifted into the air the stillness holds for a moment longer, fragile and stretched thin, until a distant sound breaks through the edges of it, the faint hum of a passing car beyond the park, the rustle of leaves shifting overhead, and then Rex moves again, not forward this time, but slightly to the side, adjusting his position with quiet precision, placing himself more firmly between Lily and the man as if drawing a line that cannot be crossed. Ethan feels the shift immediately, that subtle repositioning that speaks louder than any command, and his voice drops lower, steadier. "Lily, stay right here with me," he says, not taking his eyes off the man, and she nods without hesitation, her small hand now resting fully against Rex's shoulder, fingers curling into the thick fur as if anchoring herself to something real. The man exhales slowly, his gaze flicking once more around the park, measuring the distance to the path, to the open field, to the people who are now watching more openly, their curiosity no longer hidden. And for the first time, there is something unsettled in the way he stands, attention, that does not belong to someone with nothing to hide. "I think you're misunderstanding this," he says, his tone still controlled, but there's a tightness beneath it now, something less certain, something pressed. Ethan nods once, calm, not confrontational, but unyielding. "Then help me understand," he replies, his posture relaxed but grounded, the kind of stillness that does not give space for easy exit. Rex's ears twitch again, catching something subtle, something beyond words, and his head turns slightly toward the man's jacket, his nose lifting just enough to confirm what instinct already holds, and that low sound returns, quieter now but deeper, resonating with a certainty that cannot be taught. Lily shifts again, her voice barely above a breath. He said we would leave soon. And the words land like a quiet echo of something that almost happened, something interrupted just in time. Ethan's gaze sharpens, not with anger, not with fear, but with clarity, the kind that comes when pieces begin to align without needing to be forced. The man's expression flickers just for a second, a crack in the surface, and then he takes another step back, small, measured, but this time Rex mirrors it faster, stepping forward with controlled intent, closing the space before it can widen. Not aggressive, not lunging, but firm, unyielding, as if saying without sound that this moment will not be allowed to slip away. A voice carries faintly from behind, someone calling out, uncertain, asking if everything is all right. And Ethan raises one hand slightly without looking back, a quiet signal that does not escalate, but does not dismiss, holding the situation steady within its boundaries. The man glances toward the voice, then back to Ethan, and something in that exchange shifts again, the calculation returning, sharper now, more urgent, but still contained. I should go, he says, not asking, just stating, but his feet do not move yet because Rex has already made that decision complicated. Ethan takes a slow breath, his hand steady on the leash, not pulling, not restraining, just connected. We are not going anywhere just yet. He replies evenly, and the words settle into the space with quiet weight. Lily presses closer to Rex, her eyes now fixed on Ethan, searching, trusting a way that feels immediate and absolute, and Rex leans into her again, his body warm, steady, a living barrier that does not break. The breeze shifts once more, carrying with it the distant sound of sirens, faint but growing, weaving through the trees like a promise approaching from far away, and Rex hears it before anyone else. His ears lifting, his posture adjusting just slightly, not relaxing. Not yet, but recognizing the change. The man hears it too, and this time the reaction is clearer. A tightening at the jaw, a glance toward the path that leads out of the park, and then back again, caught between movement and stillness. Ethan does not move, does not rush, because the moment has already shifted beyond urgency into inevitability, and beside him Rex stands unwavering, eyes locked, breath steady, holding the line that was drawn the second a small hand lifted into the sunlight, and, asked to be seen, the sound of the approaching sirens grows clearer now, no longer distant, no longer uncertain, but still far enough away to leave this moment suspended between action and consequence. And in that space the man makes his decision, not with words, not with sudden movement, but with a shift so subtle it might have been missed by anyone who was not already watching for it, his weight transferring, his shoulders angling slightly toward the open path, his eyes flicking once more, toward the edge of the park as if measuring the last possible exit. Rex sees it before it happens, his body tightening just enough, his stance lowering by an inch, the line of his back firm and unyielding. And when the man takes that first step, casual on the surface but driven underneath, Rex responds instantly, not with force, not with chaos, but with precision, stepping forward into the space with a controlled block that closes the gap without touching, without escalating, simply refusing to let the path remain open. The movement draws attention now, more clearly, a few voices rising in quiet confusion, a stroller pausing, a couple turning fully to watch, but there is no panic, no shouting, just the slow realization that something serious is unfolding in a place that is supposed to feel safe. Easy, Ethan says quietly, not to Rex but to the moment itself, his voice steady, grounded, and Rex holds, exactly where he is, eyes fixed, breath measured, the low sound in his chest no longer uncertain but defined, a boundary drawn in sound instead of lines. The man stops, not because he chooses to, but because the space ahead of him no longer belongs to him, and for the first time his. Composure falters in a way that cannot be hidden, a tightening in his expression, a flicker of something sharper behind his eyes, something that does not match the calm he has tried to maintain. "You are making a mistake," he says, his voice controlled but thinner now, less certain, and Ethan shakes his head once, slow, deliberate. "No, sir," he replies, calm but firm. "I think we are finally seeing things clearly." And the words settle into the air with a quiet finality. Lily's grip on Rex steadies, no longer trembling as much, her breathing evening out as she leans slightly into the dog's solid presence. And Rex responds by shifting just enough to keep her behind him, his body forming that same silent shield he had built countless times before, not out of aggression, but out of certainty. The sirens grow louder now, weaving through the streets beyond the park, close enough to be recognized by everyone within earshot. And the man hears it too, his gaze snapping briefly toward the sound, then back again, caught between options that are no longer available. Ethan does not move forward, does not close the distance, because he does not need to. The moment has already settled in a place held steady by something stronger than force. Rex takes one slow step forward, not advancing, not threatening, but reinforcing the line, and the man takes an involuntary step back in response. The shift small but undeniable. The crowd has grown quieter now, the earlier hum of the park replaced by a focused stillness. People watching without fully understanding, sensing that what they are witnessing is not chaos, but control, not danger, but the prevention of it. Lily looks up at Ethan for the first time since this began, her eyes clearer now, steadier, and she whispers, "He cannot go." And Ethan nods once, not needing to ask why, not needing more explanation, because everything that matters is already present in the space between them. The sirens finally break into view beyond the trees, flashing lights filtering through the leaves, and Rex's ears flick once more, recognizing the shift from tension to resolution. But he does not relax yet, not until the moment is fully complete, not until the line he's held is no longer needed. And in that quiet, controlled standstill, beneath the fading sunlight and the watchful silence of the park, it becomes clear to everyone who is paying attention that nothing here was random, nothing here was chance, that a small signal given in fear had been understood, answered, and held steady by something that did not need words to know what was right. The flashing lights spill across the grass in soft pulses of red and blue, not harsh, not overwhelming, but enough to shift the weight of the moment. And as the patrol car rolls to a stop near the edge of the path, the quiet tension that has been holding everything in place begins to loosen just slightly, like a breath finally allowed to leave the chest. Two officers step out, their movements calm, measured, their presence steady rather than forceful, and Ethan raises his hand in a small, controlled gesture to guide their attention without breaking the fragile balance that Rex is still maintaining. The man glances once more toward the open park, toward the space that had seemed like an exit just minutes ago, but now feels distant, unreachable, and he exhales slowly, his shoulders lowering in a way that is not quite surrender, but no longer resistance either. Rex does not move from his position, his body still firm, still grounded, but the low sound his chest fades into silence, replaced by a steady, watchful stillness as the officers approach. "Everything all right here?" one of them asks, his tone even, observant, and Ethan nods once, calm, controlled. "We have a situation that needs a closer look," he replies, keeping his voice level, not escalating, not dramatizing, just stating what is already understood beneath the surface. Lily shifts slightly behind Rex, her fingers still resting in his fur, but her grip is different now, less desperate, more anchored, and when one of the officers kneels a few feet away, lowering himself to her level, his voice gentle, "Hey there, you okay?" She hesitates only a moment before nodding, her eyes flicking briefly to Ethan, then back to Rex, as if confirming that the ground beneath her is still steady. The second officer turns his attention to the man, asking a few quiet questions, nothing sharp, nothing confrontational, but enough to begin drawing lines where uncertainty had lived, and the man answers in short, controlled responses, his composure returning in pieces but never fully settling. Rex watches everything, his gaze moving between the officers, the man, and Lily, not tense, not reactive, but aware in a way that feels almost protective, as if he is making sure that what has been held together does not unravel too quickly. The sounds of the park begin to return in fragments, a distant laugh, the rustle of leaves, the soft murmur of voices as people begin to step back, giving space, sensing that the moment is no longer theirs to witness. Ethan finally loosens his grip on the leash just enough to let it rest more naturally in his hand. Not pulling, not guiding, simply staying connected, and Rex responds by lowering his head slightly, his posture easing by a fraction, the edge of alertness softening into something quieter, something resolved. Lily takes a small step forward, then another, and without thinking she wraps her arms gently around Rex's neck, pressing her face in his fur, and for the first time since this began, Rex allows himself to relax fully, his tail giving a slow, steady movement, his body warm and solid beneath her, no longer a barrier but a place to rest. Ethan watches them for a moment, the weight of everything settling into something quieter inside him, something that does not need words, and one of the officers looks up at him with a small nod, an unspoken acknowledgement that whatever needed to be seen has been seen. The man is guided a few steps away, not roughly, not urgently, just firmly enough to separate him from the space he no longer controls. And as he moves, he glances once more toward Lily, but this time there is nothing in that look that holds power, only distance. The light shifts again as the sun dips lower behind the trees, casting longer shadows across the path, and the park begins to breathe again, slowly, naturally, as if the interruption has passed through it without breaking it. Rex remains where he is, steady, calm, present, and Lily stays close, her hand still resting against him as if she has found something she does not want to lose, and Ethan stands beside them, quiet, grounded, knowing that sometimes the loudest moments are not the ones that echo, but the ones that settle softly into place and change everything without ever raising their voice. The park settles into a quieter rhythm as the patrol car doors close with soft, final sounds, and the flashing lights dim to a steady presence that no longer demands attention, but simply exists at the edge of the moment, and Ethan exhales slowly, the kind of breath that comes after something has passed but not yet fully left. Rex remains beside Lily, his body relaxed now, no longer holding a line, no longer guarding a boundary, just present, steady, his head slightly lowered as if listening to something deeper than the fading noise around them. Lily does not let go right away, her arms still wrapped gently around his neck, her face pressed into the thick fur that had become her safe place without warning. And when she finally steps back, it is only by a small distance, just enough to look at him, her eyes softer now, clearer, as if something inside her has been returned to where it belongs. One of the officers speaks quietly with Ethan nearby, their voices low, respectful, asking for simple details, names, what was seen, what was noticed, and Ethan answers without embellishment, without urgency, just the truth as it unfolded, each piece placed carefully where it belongs, because this was never about proving something, only about seeing it in time. The other officer kneels again near Lily, offering gentle reassurance, asking if she knows how to reach her family. And she nods slowly, her voice still small but steady enough now to carry, and as she speaks, her hand never strays far from Rex, as if she is still anchored to the moment that changed everything. The sun dips lower behind the trees, casting long golden shadows across the path, the kind that stretch quietly and then disappear without anyone noticing exactly when, and the park begins to fill again with its ordinary sounds, footsteps, laughter, the distant rhythm of life continuing as it always does. Ethan watches Rex for a moment, studying the way the dog's posture has softened, the way his breathing has slowed, and there is something in that stillness that feels familiar, not from training, not from commands, but from something older, something that cannot be written down or taught in drills. "You did good," Ethan says quietly, almost to himself, and Rex flicks one ear in response, not seeking praise, not expecting it, just acknowledging in the simplest way that what needed to be done has been done. Lily steps a little closer again, her fingers brushing lightly along Rex's shoulder, and she looks up at Ethan with a question that does not quite form into words, and he meets her gaze with the same calm steadiness he has held since the beginning, not offering explanations, not asking for them, just present in the space they now share. How did he know? She asks finally, her voice barely above a whisper. And Ethan pauses, his eyes shifting briefly to Rex, then back to her. And he does not answer right away, because some things are not meant to be explained too quickly. The breeze moves softly through the trees, carrying the scent of grass and distant water, and Rex lifts his head slightly, his gaze drifting beyond them for a moment as if following something unseen, something remembered. Ethan lets out a quiet breath and answers simply, "Sometimes they just do." And Lily nods slowly, as if that is enough, as if it always was. The officers finish their conversation, the situation settling fully into resolution, and the man who had once held the moment now fades into the background. No longer part of the center, no longer part of the story that matters. The sky deepens into a softer shade of evening, the light turning warmer, gentler, and Rex sits down beside Lily without being told. His presence no longer a barrier, no longer a warning, but a quiet companion. Ethan stands there for a moment longer, looking at them both, at the stillness that has replaced tension, at the space that now feels whole again, and there's a kind of understanding in it that does not need to be spoken. The park continues around them, unaware of how close something came, unaware of how a small signal changed the course of an ordinary day. And as the last of the sunlight slips through the branches above, Rex rests his head gently against Lily's side, not guarding, not searching, just staying, and in that quiet, unremarkable gesture, something deeper settles into place, something that does not end with sirens or questions or answers, but lingers in the simple truth that sometimes the smallest call for help is heard by the one soul who was meant to hear it, and sometimes that is all it takes to bring someone back into the light in this deeply emotional cinematic narrative. A United States Marine and his highly trained German Shepherd K9 encounter a quiet moment in a peaceful American park that quickly turns into something far more profound, as a young girl delivers a subtle, almost invisible signal that only the dog can understand. What unfolds is one of those rare animal stories where instinct, trust, and unspoken communication rise above logic, showing how a loyal K9 can detect fear and danger long before any human realizes it. Through tension-filled silence, controlled presence, and the powerful bond between a Marine and his dog, this story captures the essence of animal stories that highlight courage without violence and protection without chaos. As the Marine carefully reads the situation and the German Shepherd responds with precision and unwavering focus, the scene builds into a quiet yet gripping emotional arc where a vulnerable child finds safety not through words but through connection. This is one of those unforgettable animal stories where the smallest gesture becomes the loudest cry for help, and where loyalty turns into action without ever needing aggression. The atmosphere remains grounded in realism, with subtle cues, shifting body language, and controlled reactions guiding the narrative forward, making it one of the most compelling animal stories for viewers who appreciate meaningful storytelling over spectacle. As law enforcement arrives and the tension dissolves into relief, the emotional payoff settles gently, leaving behind a lasting impression of trust, protection, and quiet heroism. In the end, this story stands as one of those powerful animal stories that remind us how sometimes the strongest acts of courage happen in silence, carried out by those who do not need words to understand when something is wrong and who step forward anyway to make it right.